Carrie Fenton presents a new dark fantasy, Odran, the Half-Ork. Story 1 of 12.
The orks, with a culture of domination and conquest, will regularly mount their slaves and satisfy themselves as they see fit. These acts are often violent and can result in the offspring of a creature with no other name than Half-Ork. These mongrels are treated as property, slaves to the bidding of the orks who bore them. The orks bear no love for their half-ork offspring, and will often discard them without a single thought. The half-ork is just as violent and savage as the ork, possibly more so, having not been taught to speak or reason. They are nothing more than animals, having no place in imperial society. Elves will kill them on sight, but there is no need to be so cruel to them. An animal has no control over its own nature.
Imperial Codex on the Races of Mund, Volume 8, On Orks, by Grand Worshipful Mage Ilan Athtis. The ship could not reach the dock fast enough. If the man had not been retching over the side of the deck, he would have gone the whole voyage blissfully unnoticed. That was what he wanted, after all, and he had to be thankful the attention he got was kept at a distance. The man fixed his hood over his head to keep his face hidden as he exited the ship's deck at Zangport, the small coast town just west of Azcaster. He thanked whichever god foolish enough to listen that his feet finally touched dry, solid, unmoving land. The man did not bother with the bags being unloaded from the ship's cargo bay. He had no possessions aside from the few items stuffed in his knapsack thrown over his shoulder. He hunched with the east wind to ensure his hood did not come off his head and began to walk the portside street. He took notice of the peddlers and merchants shouting their wares to pedestrians walking the street sides as Puritan-drawn carriages filed along the paved roads. Many peddlers were fishermen with the morning's catch, and the stench of fish mingled with the salt air.
"Hostages at Castle Sarum!"
The voice of a young boy, not yet out of his teens, came over the crowd and into the drifter's ear.
"Read today's Edorit Gazette to learn the true story of the attack on the Imperial Castle. Who, what, and how?"
The drifter noticed the young boy at a stand selling newspapers, his shock of white hair being his most defining characteristic. He had heard that citizens of the Empire received their news by paper, and was curious at what it would say. Keeping his hood up, he walked toward the adolescent newspaper peddler and wordlessly gestured to receive a paper.
"Copper note, sir."
The adolescent lowered his voice to speak to the drifter. The cloaked man could not understand the boy. He assumed he wanted payment for the paper, but the drifter had no money of any kind. He had no gem coins from his homeland to exchange into whatever the Empire used for currency, and did not think he would need it for where he was planning to go. He made another wordless gesture to receive a newspaper, this time with a little more force and a soft grunt to intimidate the boy.
"Well, I can't just give it to you, mister."
The boy smiled in an attempt to thwart the intimidation.
"I need the money. I'm saving up so I can join the Knights of the Plumed Serpent, and they—"
The boy was using too many words which the drifter could not understand. He had learned the basics of Imperial Common before he had sailed for these shores, but his practice had been too little too late. He took the boy's explanation for refusal to give him the paper and turned to walk away. He had lost interest in whatever it was going to say. He probably would not be able to read it anyway. The drifter managed a few strides before being stopped by 3 men in metal plate armor of a blue hue with silver accents. They held their open-faced helms under their arms, the silvery plumage being bent by their armpits. The soldiers in the center of the 3 held out a hand to the drifter's chest to stop them.
"Whoa there, fella!"
The soldier spoke in a jovial tone.
"You're in too much of a hurry to buy this boy's paper?"
The other 2 soldiers moved to flank the drifter on either side of him. If he noticed their movements, he made no sign of it.
"This fine young boy is working hard,"
the lead soldier continued,
"saving his notes so he can join the prestigious ranks of the Knights of the Plumed Serpent. Will you deny him the privilege despite his hard work?"
The drifter said nothing, but stood still amidst the 3 soldiers, apparently members of a knighthood to which the boy aspired. Under his cloak, his hand moved unseen to a heavy object hanging at his belt.
"See, boys?"
The lead knight spoke to his cronies, though keeping his eyes on the drifter's obscured face.
"This here is what I call a ruffian. Come off that boat, did you? Well, clearly no one told you about the toll you had to pay."
The two flanking knights gave chuckles as they seemed to casually ready their stances for physical resistance. Or perhaps they were just being intimidating. The drifter could not decide which. "You want to walk our streets?" The knight bent his head to try to see under the drifter's hood. "You gotta pay us our security fee. Otherwise we cannot promise your safety. These are dangerous times we live in, and it would behoove one to keep their friends about them. We can be your friends, but friendship costs." The drifter grew bored of the jabbering knight and stepped diagonally to try to get past him. As he did, the knight put his hand on the drifter's chest to stop him, moving slightly so as to remain in the drifter's way. Now, the knight continued. "It's just a simple fee and you can be on your way. 20 gold notes for our vigilant protection." The drifter made another move, blocked again by the knight as his cronies formed the triangular attack formation. "Now you're just being rude," the knight scolded. "I'm giving you one more chance, which is more than I give most. I'm feeling generous today. 20 gold notes and we will not be bothering you anymore." The drifter gave a subtle yet audible growl from beneath his hood. The noise caught the knight's attention, and he gave one more look at the face beneath the hood. With an abhorrent scoff and look of revulsion, the knight drew his sword and swung at the drifter. With a flick of the faded black cloak, the drifter's hand came out in terrible speed, brandishing a hand axe which pressed the knight's freshly drawn sword against his breastplate. As he held him there, he gave another growl, more audible and menacing, baring his teeth. The two flanking knights drew their broad blades, short swords both, and charged at the drifter. The thin black cloak bellowed with the upswing of the drifter's leg as he pulled all of his weight on the hold towards the lead attacker to kick one of the charging knights in the face. Quickly he swung from his hold and brought his axe down upon the third knight's armored shoulders. Quickly and unseen by all spectators, the drifter had spun the axe around so the blunt end rang against the metal of the armor, disorienting the knight within. With the flat end of the axe, the drifter swung back at the leading knight, slapping him across the cheek with brutal force. The knight was sent careening to the brick pavement of the streets. The drifter continued his swing, now facing the knight he had kicked in the face. He charged his assailant with confident strides and sent the blunt tip of his axe into the knight's throat. With his other hand grasping the base of his skull and his legs swung between its target, he sent the knight sprawling to the pavement on his back, his throat hoarse with the pressure of the attacker's axe tip. Standing back up again, the drifter made casually menacing strides toward the third knight, who was recovering from his disorientation. At this point, the drifter's hood had fallen from his face as he arose, showing his countenance to the only knight who remained on his feet. What he saw drew all of his courage from him. The drifter had long and matted locks of a blue so dark it appeared black. His skin was a pale gray and his eyes were a sickly yellow. His brows seemed to be furrowed in a permanent scowl. His ears were pointed long and upward. His mouth bore teeth of a most frightening sort, for from his underbite rose 2 tusks reaching just beyond his upper lip. "You're—" the knight stammered as he stepped back from the advancing attacker. You're an orc?" "Half," the orc muttered as he reached the withdrawing knight and gave him a swift headbutt, knocking him unconscious and collapsed on the pavement with his companions. The half-orc turned around to see the 3 knights all wisely staying on the ground so as to not incur the ire of their quarry any more. The land of Azkester was riddled with orcs, and the rumor was that Dubois had allowed them to run rampant through his lands with impunity. Even the knights contracted to the Dubois house, the Boanim, also called the Knights of the Plumed Serpent, were warned against facing an orc without express orders. The drifter gave one last look to the adolescent with the newspaper, putting his hood up again. He took a few steps toward the boy, who stepped back in fear. The orc paused and bent down to reach for one of the knights still laying on the pavement. He rifled through the knight's belt pouch and withdrew the imperial notes which he found there. 50 gold notes and 10 copper. He tossed them to the boy, who promptly caught them with amazement. "Jagoth," the half-orc spoke pithily and with barely a breath. The boy stared at him, mouth agape. After a swift moment he pointed west beyond the gates of Zangport, beyond even the spires of Azrak Keep which loomed in the distance. With a nod of thanks, the half-orc swiped one of the newspapers and headed in the direction which the boy pointed. He replaced his hood atop his head and put his axe back on his belt. His cloak once again covered his frame, and he appeared a simple swaying shadow in the wind. Thank you for listening to this snippet of Odran the Half-Ork by Archer Rain. To hear the full audiobook or read at your own pace, follow the link in the description to subscribe to my Patreon. I'll see you next week with another snippet from the Odran the Half-Ork series. Until then, have fun, and bye-bye.